Across dense forests, remote mountains, and fog-choked wetlands, terrifying reports of Sasquatch attacks have echoed for decades. Campers vanish without a trace, hikers stumble upon mutilated animals, and massive footprints lead nowhere. While officials often blame bears or isolation-induced panic, survivors and eyewitnesses insist something else is out there, something watching, waiting, and violently territorial. From hunting trips gone wrong to eerie roadside encounters and harrowing home invasions, this episode uncovers 6 chilling Sasquatch encounters that blur the line between myth and nightmare. The Appalachian Trail near Wesser, North Carolina, had always been considered one of the safer sections of the famous hiking route. The area, situated along the dense forested ridgelines overlooking the Nantahala River, attracted thousands of hikers annually with its challenging switchbacks and breathtaking mountain vistas. The local wildlife consisted primarily of black bears, wild boar, and the occasional mountain lion, although no fatal attacks had been recorded in the region for over a decade. On June 3, 2025, Benjamin Griggs, a 30-year-old freelance travel writer from Portland, Maine, embarked on what was supposed to be a solo, 5-day hiking expedition through this section of the trail. Griggs had been documenting remote hiking destinations for various outdoor magazines and had specifically chosen this area for its reputation as both challenging and relatively undisturbed by heavy tourist traffic. Griggs had informed the local ranger station of his intended route and expected return date of June 7th. He carried standard hiking equipment, including a GPS device, an emergency beacon, and sufficient supplies for his planned journey. His last confirmed contact was a text message sent to his editor on the evening of June 3rd, stating that he had successfully reached his intended campsite near mile marker 137. 3 days later, on June 6th, a group of German backpackers hiking the same section discovered what remained of Griggs's campsite. The scene that greeted them was unlike anything they had encountered in their extensive hiking experience across multiple continents. The campsite appeared to have been the center of an extraordinarily violent encounter. Griggs's tent had been completely shredded, with tears that suggested incredible force rather than the typical claw marks associated with bear attacks. His gear was scattered across a wide radius, with some items found hanging from tree branches nearly 15 feet above the ground. Most disturbing was the presence of dried blood splattered across leaves and tree trunks in the immediate vicinity. The German hikers, led by Klaus Zimmermann, a retired police officer, immediately contacted authorities via satellite phone. They reported finding what appeared to be human remains partially buried beneath a pile of leaves and debris approximately 50 yards from the destroyed campsite. The item was later identified as Griggs's hiking boot, still containing his severed foot. Emergency response teams arrived by helicopter within 4 hours of the initial report. The scene was immediately secured, and a comprehensive search of the surrounding area was initiated. Search and rescue teams combed through nearly 10 square miles of dense forest over the following week, but no additional human remains were recovered. The initial forensic examination revealed several puzzling elements that didn't align with typical wildlife attacks in the region. Most notably, investigators discovered a series of footprints in the soft mud near a creek that ran close to the campsite. These prints, which measured approximately 18 inches in length, showed clear impressions of 5 toes, but were far too large to belong to any known human. The depth of the impressions suggested that whatever had made them was significantly heavier than an average person, with estimated weight calculations indicating a creature of at least 400 pounds. The stride length between prints measured nearly 6 feet, far exceeding normal human gait patterns. Ranger Tom Ellis, a 20-year veteran of the Nantahala National Forest, privately admitted to investigators that he had encountered similar prints in 2004 during another unexplained disappearance in the same general area. However, Ellis reported that his superiors had instructed him not to pursue the matter further at that time. The official incident report, released 3 weeks after Griggs's disappearance, concluded that the most likely cause was a fatal black bear attack, followed by scavenging by other wildlife. However, this conclusion was disputed by several wildlife experts who noted the absence of typical bear claw marks and the unusual pattern of destruction at the campsite. Griggs' family was provided with a heavily redacted version of the autopsy report. Online hiking forums began circulating theories about a potential cover-up, particularly after 2 more hikers reported similar encounters with an unknown creature in the same area over the following months. The case remains officially closed, though Benjamin Griggs was never officially declared dead due to the limited remains recovered. The Varavara National Preserve in northeastern Estonia had always been known for its pristine wilderness and ancient forests that stretched unbroken for miles. The park, established in 1971, encompassed over 725 square kilometers of diverse ecosystems, including coastal meadows, bogs, and dense coniferous forests. However, one particular area within the park had remained off-limits to public access since 198, when a series of landslides rendered the Black Hollow Trail too dangerous for hiking. The trail, which had once been a popular route leading to spectacular views of the Baltic Sea, wound through some of the most remote and untouched woodland in the region. Local Estonian folklore spoke of ancient spirits dwelling in these deep forests. Still, such stories were generally dismissed by the Soviet authorities, who had controlled the region until recent independence, as remnants of pre-Christian superstitions. In September 1996, siblings Annalie and Rasmus Virmai decided to explore the abandoned Black Hollow Trail during what was supposed to be a routine weekend camping trip. Annalie, 28, worked as a translator in Tallinn, while her younger brother Rasmus, 25, was completing his doctoral studies in forestry at an institute involving environmental sciences. Both were experienced hikers who had grown up exploring the Estonian wilderness with their grandfather. The siblings had obtained unofficial permission from a park ranger to access the closed trail, primarily because Rasmus was conducting research on forest regeneration in areas affected by landslides. They planned to spend 2 nights documenting the natural recovery of the ecosystem and collecting soil samples from various points along the former trail. On their first day, September 14th, the weather was crisp and clear, typical for early autumn in the region. The siblings made good progress along the overgrown path, noting how quickly nature had begun to reclaim the abandoned trail. Rasmus documented several interesting examples of pioneer plant species establishing themselves in the disturbed soil areas, while Annalie photographed the changing landscape. As evening approached, they set up their camp in a small clearing, approximately 3 kilometers from the trailhead. The location provided good shelter from wind and was situated near a small stream that provided fresh water. Both siblings later reported that the first night passed without incident, though they noted an unusual absence of typical forest sounds such as bird calls or small animal movements. The following morning, September 15th, Rasmus set out early to collect additional soil samples from areas closer to the ravine itself, while Annalie remained at the campsite to organize their research materials and prepare detailed notes about their observations. This decision to separate would prove to be a fateful mistake. According to Annalie's later testimony to authorities, Rasmus departed the campsite at approximately 7:30 in the morning, carrying his sampling equipment and promising to return by midday. When he failed to appear by late afternoon, Annalie became increasingly concerned and decided to search for him along the path he had indicated he would follow. As darkness began to fall, Annalie reported hearing what she initially described as human screaming coming from the direction of the ravine. The sounds were unlike anything she had encountered before, combining elements that seemed both human and animal in nature. She called out for her brother but received no response other than an immediate cessation of the screaming sounds. According to Annalie's account, what happened next defied rational explanation. She reported seeing a large, dark figure moving through the trees near the edge of the ravine. The creature appeared to be carrying something over its shoulder, though the failing light made it impossible to determine exactly what it was. The figure moved with a peculiar gait that she described as being neither fully upright like a human, nor on all fours like a known animal. Annalie attempted to follow the creature but found herself unable to navigate the treacherous terrain in the darkness. She spent the remainder of the night huddled in her tent, listening to occasional crashing sounds in the forest around her campsite. At first light, she gathered only essential items and began making her way back toward the park entrance. Search and rescue teams arrived within hours of Annalie's report and conducted an extensive search of the area over the following week. They recovered Rasmus's backpack, which contained his research notes and sampling equipment, but showed no signs of violence or struggle. More disturbing was the discovery of a bloodied scarf that Annalie identified as belonging to her brother, found caught on branches near the ravine edge. The official investigation concluded that Rasmus had likely suffered a fatal fall while collecting samples near the unstable edge of the ravine. However, no body was ever recovered, despite the use of specialized equipment and experienced mountain rescue personnel. The case remained officially open, though active investigation was suspended after 3 months. Annalie relocated to a small village near her childhood home shortly after the incident and has refused all requests for interviews about her brother's disappearance. Local residents report that she has not ventured into any forested area since 1996. Mount Chira, located in the remote wilderness of Aomori Prefecture in northern Japan, stood as one of the region's most challenging and least frequented peaks. Rising to an elevation of 1,847 meters, the mountain was characterized by steep granite faces, dense coniferous forests, and unpredictable weather patterns that could change from clear skies to dangerous conditions within hours. The mountain had gained a reputation among serious climbers for its technical difficulty and the pristine nature of its wilderness environment, largely untouched by commercial development. In October 1982, 3 experienced climbers planned an ambitious 3-day expedition to summit Mount Chira and explore several of its more remote ridgelines. The team consisted of Takeshi Onoda, a 34-year-old geologist from Tokyo, Yuji Natsume, a 28-year-old mountaineering instructor, and Noriko Arata, a 26-year-old photographer who specialized in wilderness landscapes. All 3 had extensive climbing experience throughout Japan and had successfully completed numerous challenging ascents in the Japanese Alps. The group registered their climbing plan with the local Mountain Rescue Service on October 12th, indicating their intended route and expected return date of October 15th. Their planned ascent would take them through some of the most isolated sections of the mountain, following rarely used trails through dense forests of Japanese cedar, fir, and hemlock trees. Weather forecasts indicated stable conditions with clear skies and moderate temperatures, making them suitable for their expedition. Takeshi served as the expedition leader, having previously climbed Mount Chira twice during the summer months. His geological expertise was valuable for route finding through the mountain's complex rock formations, while Yuji's instructional background provided essential safety leadership. Noriko's primary goal was to document the expedition and capture images of the mountain's diverse ecosystems during peak autumn foliage. On October 13th, the team made excellent progress during their first day, reaching their planned campsite at approximately 1,200 meters elevation without difficulty. Radio contact with the base lodge confirmed their successful arrival and reported normal conditions. The weather remained favorable, and all 3 climbers reported feeling confident about their prospects for reaching the summit the following day. The second day of their expedition, October 14th, began with clear skies and optimal climbing conditions. The team departed their campsite at dawn, planning to reach the summit by midday and return to a lower elevation campsite by evening. This timeline would position them well for a comfortable descent to the base lodge on their final day. However, only Yuji Natsume returned to the base lodge on October 15th. His condition upon arrival shocked the lodge staff and other climbers present. He was severely frostbitten, despite the relatively mild weather conditions, and appeared to be in a state of extreme psychological distress. His climbing gear was incomplete, and he showed signs of having spent considerable time exposed to harsh conditions. Yuji's initial account of what had occurred during the expedition seemed almost incomprehensible to those who heard it. He reported that while the team was traversing a narrow ridge section at approximately 1,600 meters elevation, Takeshi had been attacked and dragged away by a creature that Yuji described as being unlike any known animal. According to his testimony, the creature was approximately 8 feet tall, covered in dark hair, and possessed glowing yellow eyes that reflected light in an unnatural manner. He further claimed that when Noriko attempted to assist Takeshi, she was struck by the creature with such force that she was knocked from the ridge and fell into a deep ravine. Yuji stated that he had attempted to climb down to reach her, but found the terrain too treacherous and was forced to abandon the rescue attempt when the creature returned and began pursuing him. Mountain rescue teams were dispatched immediately upon receiving Yuji's report. The search operation involved over 40 experienced climbers and rescue personnel working in difficult terrain under increasingly poor weather conditions. Despite their extensive efforts over the following week, no trace of either Takeshi or Noriko was discovered. The search teams did locate evidence of some type of significant disturbance in the area where Yuji claimed the attack had occurred. Climbing equipment belonging to both missing climbers was found scattered across a wide area, much of it damaged in ways that suggested extreme force had been applied. Vegetation in the immediate vicinity showed signs of having been violently disturbed, with several small trees completely uprooted. Most puzzling to the investigators were a series of large footprints discovered in the soft soil near the ridge where the incident allegedly occurred. The prints were approximately 16 inches in length and showed clear impressions of 5 toes. but were far too large to belong to any human member of the climbing party. The depth of the impressions suggested that whatever had made them was significantly heavier than a person. A local hunter who had been tracking deer in the area several days before the climbing expedition reported to authorities that he had observed similar large footprints in various locations throughout the forest. He mentioned that the tracks appeared to follow game trails, but then disappeared abruptly at the edge of a cliff face, as if whatever had made them possessed the ability to traverse terrain that would be impossible for normal animals. The official investigation concluded that both climbers had likely died as a result of falls from the treacherous ridge sections, with their bodies swept away by the strong winds common at that elevation. Yuji's account was attributed to altitude sickness, hypothermia, and the psychological trauma of witnessing his companions' deaths under extreme conditions. However, several aspects of the case remained unexplained. Medical examination of Yuji revealed injuries consistent with an attack by claws, though these were officially attributed to falls on sharp rock surfaces. His frostbite injuries were more severe than would be expected given the weather conditions and his experience level, suggesting he had been exposed to extreme cold for longer periods than his timeline indicated. Following the incident, Yuji relocated to Tokyo and abandoned mountaineering entirely. He refused to discuss the events at Mount Chira with media representatives and declined to participate in follow-up investigations. The case was officially closed 6 months later, though both climbers remain listed as missing persons rather than confirmed fatalities due to the absence of recovered remains. The Silver Pine Highlands region of British Columbia had long been a favored destination for couples seeking romantic getaways in pristine wilderness settings. Located approximately 40 kilometers northwest of Vancouver, the area featured dozens of secluded rental cabins scattered throughout dense forests of Douglas fir, western hemlock, and cedar trees. The region's reputation for tranquility and natural beauty made it particularly popular during winter months, when snow-covered landscapes provided an ideal backdrop for honeymoons and anniversary celebrations. In February 2009, newlyweds Caleb and Michelle Whitford booked a week-long stay at one of the more remote cabins in the Highlands. Caleb, a 32-year-old accountant from Seattle, and Michelle, a 29-year-old graphic designer, had specifically requested the most isolated accommodation available, wanting to escape the pressures of their demanding careers and enjoy uninterrupted time together following their wedding. The cabin they selected was situated nearly 8 kilometers from the nearest neighbor, accessible only by a narrow, winding dirt road that required a four-wheel drive vehicle during winter conditions. Built in the 1970s from local timber, the structure featured a single large room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area, and a loft bedroom. The property was surrounded by old-growth forest that provided complete privacy and spectacular views of snow-covered mountain peaks. The Whitfords arrived at their cabin on February 14th during a light snowfall that had left approximately 6 inches of fresh powder on the ground. They spent their first day settling in, exploring the immediate area around the cabin, and enjoying the solitude they had been seeking. Both later reported that their first night was peaceful and exactly what they had hoped for from their winter retreat. The second night, February 15th, began normally as the couple prepared dinner and enjoyed wine by the fireplace. At approximately 10:30, they were startled by a series of slow, deliberate knocking sounds that appeared to originate from the exterior wall facing the forest. The knocks came in groups of 3, spaced about 5 seconds apart, and seemed to move along the wall from one end to the other. Michelle initially suggested that falling snow or ice might be causing the sounds, though both acknowledged that the knocking pattern seemed too regular and deliberate to be a natural phenomena. Caleb investigated the area around that wall using a flashlight, but found no obvious source for the disturbance. The snow showed no footprints or other signs of activity, and the knocking ceased while he was outside. Approximately 30 minutes later, the knocking resumed, this time originating from the wall opposite the first location. Again, the pattern consisted of 3 deliberate knocks, followed by silence, then repetition. The sounds continued for nearly an hour, methodically moving around the entire perimeter of the cabin as if something was circling the structure. Caleb made 2 more attempts to investigate the source of the disturbance, each time finding no evidence of what might be causing the sounds. During his second venture outside, he noticed that the knocking stopped immediately when he opened the door, resuming only after he had been back inside for several minutes. The pattern continued throughout the night, with the knocking sounds occurring at irregular intervals, but always following the same methodical progression around the cabin walls. Both Caleb and Michelle reported getting very little sleep, as the sounds were too loud and persistent to ignore. They noted that the knocking seemed to intensify whenever they moved around inside the cabin, as if responding to their activities. At first light on February 16th, the couple conducted a thorough examination of the cabin's exterior. What they discovered was deeply unsettling. The entire structure exhibited signs of having been in contact with something large and powerful. Scratch marks, clearly visible in the wood siding, extended from ground level to approximately 8 feet up the walls. The marks appeared to have been made by claws, but were far too large and widely spaced to belong to any known animal in the region. Most disturbing was the discovery of a muddy handprint on the back window of the cabin. The print measured nearly 12 inches from palm to fingertip and showed clear impressions of 5 fingers with what appeared to be claw-like nails. The print was positioned approximately 7 feet above ground level, requiring exceptional reach to create. Additional evidence included several broken branches on nearby trees at heights that would require significant strength to damage, as well as depressions in the snow around the cabin that suggested the presence of something much larger and heavier than typical wildlife. The depressions showed a rough oval shape approximately 18 inches in length, but were too distorted by melting snow to provide clear detail. The Whitfords immediately packed their belongings and departed the cabin that morning, despite having paid for 5 additional nights. They drove directly to the rental agency office and reported the incident, requesting a full refund of their payment. The agency manager listened to their account with apparent concern, but seemed unsurprised by their story. During their conversation with the rental manager, the Whitfords learned that their cabin had not been rented to anyone for over 14 months prior to their reservation. When they pressed for an explanation, the manager became evasive, mentioning only that there had been previous incidents that had made the property difficult to book. He refused to provide specific details about these earlier occurrences. Local residents they spoke with while purchasing supplies for their return journey were similarly reluctant to discuss the area, though several mentioned that certain cabins in the highlands had reputations for unusual activity. One elderly resident suggested that some locations in the deep forest were better left undisturbed, but declined to elaborate on this warning. The couple returned to Seattle that evening and never attempted another wilderness retreat. Michelle reported experiencing recurring nightmares about the knocking sounds for several months following the incident, while Caleb developed a strong aversion to spending time in forested areas. The Wadanook Wetlands in Australia's Northern Territory represented one of the continent's most pristine and biologically diverse mangrove ecosystems. Stretching across nearly 15,000 hectares of tidal flats, river deltas, and dense mangrove forests, the area served as a critical habitat for hundreds of bird species, marine life, and reptiles, including some of the largest saltwater crocodiles in the world. The remote location, accessible only by boat or four-wheel drive vehicle, had made it an ideal site for scientific research with minimal human interference. In March 2014, Southern Coastal University's marine biology program initiated a comprehensive bird migration study in the Wadanook region. The research project aimed to document seasonal patterns of migratory species and assess the impact of climate change on traditional breeding grounds. Lisa Carmichael, a 25-year-old marine biology graduate student, was assigned to conduct field research as part of her master's thesis on wading bird populations. Lisa was accompanied by Ethan Briggs, a 38-year-old local guide who had been working in the Northern Territory wilderness for over 15 years. Ethan possessed extensive knowledge of the wetland ecosystems and had previously assisted numerous research teams in navigating the challenging terrain of the mangrove forests. His expertise in identifying potential dangers from crocodiles and other wildlife made him an essential member of the research expedition. The two researchers established their base camp on a small elevated island, approximately 8 kilometers into the wetland system. The location provided an excellent vantage point for observing bird activity while offering relative safety from crocodiles and protection from tidal fluctuations. Their equipment included specialized bird banding supplies, recording devices for documenting calls, and camping gear sufficient for a planned 5-day stay. During their first 3 days, the research proceeded as planned. Lisa successfully documented several species of herons, ibises, and other wading birds, while Ethan provided valuable insights into animal behavior patterns and optimal observation times. Both researchers noted the exceptional abundance of wildlife in the area, suggesting that the wetlands remained largely undisturbed by human activity. On their fourth evening, March 18th, unusual sounds began emanating from deep within the mangrove forest. Lisa initially described the sounds as resembling a deep, resonant groaning that seemed to carry across considerable distances through the dense vegetation. The vocalizations were unlike anything either researcher had encountered in their previous work in Australian wilderness areas. Ethan suggested that the sounds might be produced by a large saltwater crocodile, as these reptiles were known to make various vocalizations during mating season. However, both researchers noted that the sounds possessed qualities that seemed inconsistent with typical crocodile behavior. The vocalizations appeared to be coming from an elevated position within the mangrove canopy, rather than from water level, and they demonstrated a complexity that suggested intentional communication, rather than instinctive territorial calls. As darkness fell, Lisa and Ethan prepared their evening meal over a small camp stove while continuing to monitor the unusual sounds. The vocalizations intensified after sunset, developing into a rhythmic pattern that seemed almost musical in nature, as Lisa later described. Both researchers became increasingly concerned about the source of these sounds, particularly when they noticed that typical nocturnal animal sounds had ceased entirely in the surrounding area. At approximately 9:30 in the evening, while Lisa was organizing her research notes by lamplight, both researchers heard distinct splashing sounds coming from the shallow water surrounding their island campsite. Ethan immediately suspected crocodile activity and retrieved a powerful spotlight to investigate the source of the disturbance. What followed was recorded in Lisa's field notes as the most terrifying experience of her life. As Ethan moved toward the water's edge with his light, Lisa heard him call out in surprise and apparent fear. His voice was cut short by what she described as the sound of a violent struggle, including splashing, crashing through vegetation, and what appeared to be Ethan screaming. Lisa later reported that she immediately fled from the campsite, without attempting to investigate what had happened to her guide. Her training in wilderness safety had emphasized the importance of seeking help, rather than becoming a second victim in emergency situations. She spent the remainder of the night hiding in dense mangrove vegetation approximately 1 kilometer from their original campsite. At first light, Lisa made her way to their boat and managed to start the engine despite her limited experience with the watercraft. She navigated back toward the main river system and eventually reached a ranger station where she reported Ethan's disappearance and requested immediate assistance. Search and rescue operations began within hours of Lisa's report, with teams using boats, helicopters, and specialized equipment designed for operations in crocodile-inhabited waters. After 2 days of intensive searching, Ethan's body was discovered wedged among the root systems of a large mangrove tree, approximately 400 meters from their campsite. The condition of Ethan's remains was disturbing to the experienced rescue personnel who recovered him. While crocodile attacks typically leave distinctive bite marks and patterns of injury, Ethan's body showed evidence of trauma that was difficult to categorize. Large portions of tissue had been removed, but not in patterns consistent with crocodile feeding behavior. Additionally, several bones showed fractures that suggested extreme crushing force beyond what would be expected from known predators in the region. The official autopsy report attributed Ethan's death to an attack by a large feral pig, citing the presence of what appeared to be tusk marks on several bones. However, this conclusion was disputed by several wildlife experts who noted that feral pigs rarely venture into deep mangrove environments and typically avoid areas with high crocodile populations. Lisa's account of hearing unusual vocalizations was included in the incident report, but was not considered relevant to determining the cause of Ethan's death. However, her description of the sounds gained attention when local Aboriginal elders were consulted about the incident. Several elders mentioned traditional stories about a creature known as the Warringa, described as a large forest-dwelling being that hunted intruders in sacred wetland areas. These traditional accounts described the Warringa as a powerful creature that could move through mangrove forests with ease and possessed vocalizations unlike any known animal. According to the elders, the creature was believed to protect certain areas from disturbance and would attack those who ventured too deep into its territory without proper cultural protocols. Following the incident, Lisa abandoned her field research career and transferred to laboratory-based marine biology work. She declined to participate in follow-up investigations and refused media interviews about her experience in the Wadanook wetlands. The area was temporarily closed to research activities, though official reasons cited concerns about crocodile safety rather than any acknowledgement of unknown threats. The Sombra de Lomas mountain range in Uruguay's Tacuarembó region represented some of the most remote and challenging wilderness terrain in the country. rising to modest elevations of approximately 800 meters above sea level. The area was characterized by dense mixed forests of native species, including ombu, ceibo, and various palm trees that gave the region its name. The isolation of these mountains had preserved ecosystems largely unchanged for centuries, supporting populations of wildlife that had disappeared from more developed areas of Uruguay. Ancient mists clung to the mountainsides throughout most of the year, creating an otherworldly atmosphere that local residents often described as unsettling. The dense canopy filtered sunlight into scattered beams that barely illuminated the forest floor, where fallen logs created natural barriers and hidden ravines posed constant dangers to inexperienced travelers. Streams carved serpentine paths through the terrain, their waters running ice-cold even during Uruguay's warmest months, fed by underground springs that emerged from deep within the mountain's core. During the autumn of 1971, hunting in the Sombra de Lomas region was still considered both legal and relatively common among rural residents who supplemented their income by selling wild game and hides. The challenging terrain and abundance of deer, wild boar, and various bird species made the area attractive to experienced hunters willing to undertake the difficult journey into the remote mountains. However, even the most seasoned hunters approached Sombra de Lomas with considerable respect, aware that the mountain had claimed several lives over the decades through accidents, exposure, and unexplained disappearances. Ruben Salazar, a 52-year-old veteran hunter from the nearby town of Tacuarembó, had been planning a solo hunting expedition to Sombra de Lomas for several months. Ruben possessed over 30 years of hunting experience throughout Uruguay and northern Argentina, with a reputation for successfully tracking game in the most difficult terrain. His weathered hands bore the scars of countless expeditions, and his keen eyes could read animal signs that others would overlook entirely. His knowledge of wilderness survival and animal behavior had made him a respected figure among the hunting community in the region, often sought out by younger hunters seeking advice on tracking techniques and mountain navigation. Ruben's preparation for the expedition was characteristically meticulous. He spent weeks checking and rechecking his equipment, studying weather patterns, and consulting with local farmers about recent animal sightings in the area. His hunting rifle, a custom-modified weapon that had served him faithfully for over 2 decades, was cleaned and calibrated with the precision of a craftsman. The rifle's wooden stock bore the initials of his grandfather, who had passed down both the weapon and his love of hunting to successive generations. Ruben informed his cousin Jorge Mendoza of his plans to spend 3 days hunting in the Sombra de Lomas area, beginning on April 15th and returning on April 18th. This timeline was typical for Ruben's hunting expeditions, providing sufficient time to locate game, establish temporary camps, and navigate the challenging mountain terrain. Jorge, who often accompanied Ruben on hunting trips, remained behind due to work obligations but expected regular updates about his cousin's progress. The two men had developed a system of communication using smoke signals visible from certain vantage points, a precaution that had proved valuable during previous expeditions when unexpected weather had delayed return trips. Ruben departed Tacuarembó on the morning of April 15th, carrying his favorite hunting rifle, camping equipment, and supplies for a 4-day stay in case the weather conditions extended his stay. His equipment included a detailed hand-drawn map of the region that he had developed over years of hunting in the area, marking locations where game was commonly found and identifying reliable sources of fresh water. The map also contained warnings about dangerous areas, including unstable rock formations and sections of forest where previous hunters had reported feeling inexplicably uneasy. Local weather conditions during mid-April 1971 were particularly challenging. These conditions would have tested even Ruben's considerable wilderness skills, potentially forcing him to remain in shelter longer than anticipated and complicating his planned route through the forest. When Ruben failed to return by the evening of April 18th, Jorge became concerned. He organized a search party consisting of several experienced hunters and local residents familiar with the Sombra de Lomas region. The search team departed early on April 19th, following the route that Ruben typically used to access his preferred hunting areas in the mountains. The group included tracking dogs and emergency medical supplies, prepared for the possibility that Ruben had suffered an injury that prevented his return. The search party located Ruben's campsite on their second day of searching, approximately 12 kilometers from the nearest road access. What they discovered at the site immediately indicated that something extraordinary and violent had occurred. The scene showed evidence of a struggle far beyond anything the experienced hunters had previously encountered, defying their collective understanding of mountain wildlife behavior and natural accidents. Reuben's hunting rifle, a reliable weapon that he had maintained meticulously for over 2 decades, was found broken cleanly in half, with both pieces lying approximately 10 meters apart. The force required to snap the steel barrel and wooden stock suggested strength far exceeding human capabilities. Additionally, the rifle's scope had been completely crushed, reduced to fragments of glass and twisted metal that sparkled ominously in the filtered sunlight. Several rounds of ammunition were scattered around the campsite, with their brass casings showing deep indentations from unknown pressure, as if something with immense grip strength had compressed them like clay. Most disturbing were the claw marks discovered gouged into the bark of a large ombu tree near Reuben's tent. The marks extended from ground level to nearly 3 meters up the trunk, created by what appeared to be claws approximately 6 inches in length. The depth of the gouges indicated that whatever had created them possessed extraordinary strength, as the ombu tree's bark was known for its exceptional hardness and resistance to damage. Sap had oozed from the wounds in the bark, creating dark stains that contrasted sharply with the pale wood beneath. Blood evidence was found throughout the campsite area, with spatters indicating violent activity that had occurred over a considerable time period. The blood patterns suggested movement in multiple directions, as if a struggle had ranged across the entire clearing. However, the blood trail led directly into the dense forest. It disappeared abruptly after approximately 50 meters, as if whatever had been bleeding had either been carried away or had managed to stop the bleeding entirely through means unknown. Among the items recovered at the campsite was a torn page from Reuben's hunting journal, written in his distinctive handwriting. The entry, dated April 16th, contained only a brief notation that sent chills through the search party members who read it. The note stated simply that something was watching him, and that he could hear breathing sounds around his campsite during the night hours, accompanied by the unsettling observation that his tracking dogs had refused to enter certain areas of the forest. George later reported that during the search operation, he had observed a large, dark figure moving through the forest at a considerable distance from their location. The figure appeared to be walking upright, but with an unusual gait that seemed neither fully human nor consistent with known animal movement patterns. When Jorge attempted to approach the figure for a closer look, it disappeared into the dense vegetation with remarkable speed, leaving no trace of its passage except for a lingering smell that Jorge described as simultaneously familiar and utterly alien. The case remains officially unsolved, and Reuben Salazar's fate remains unknown, despite periodic unofficial searches by family members and interested researchers. The Sombra de Lomas region has since been designated as a protected natural area, with hunting prohibited throughout the mountain range, though some locals whisper that the protection serves purposes beyond wildlife conservation.